Hello and welcome to another episode of Archery Releases Ad Nauseum, and today I'm going to be examining the B3 Archery Huuk and Huuk Mini. It's spelled H-U-U-K, so I think it's meant to be pronounced with some sort of twang like Huuk. I'm from Pennsylvania, and my vocal cords don't really move the way they need to in order for me to do that more than once, so I'm just going to be calling it the Huuk. I'm going to preface this by saying I actually like these releases. The Huuk Mini is a perfect size for my hand. It's a pleasure to draw, it has a good feature set, and the trigger is actually pretty good, and good enough for my purposes. However, they have flaws and they have quirks, and what I'm trying to do with these reviews is make sure anyone who may be considering purchasing one knows what he or she is getting before actually committing to buying it. In this case, there are some things about these releases that are a bit off. There isn't a whole lot of info or reviews on them after they've been out for almost a year, so hopefully I'll have able to educate anybody who thinks it might be worth checking out. The various things I'm going to highlight do not necessarily affect the release's function or your potential satisfaction with them. However, when I compare them to other offerings from B3 as well as everything else I have at my disposal, I start to notice things and I can't unsee them, so I'm going to make you unsee them as well. I'm going to nitpick something briefly that's completely unrelated, and then I'm going to drop it and hopefully not bring it up again. B3 supposedly stands for Built the Best, Buy the Best, For the Best, but there are 5 B's in that statement. So why B3 Archery? And which 3 of the 5 words in the statement starting with B does the name actually refer to? Does B3 stand for Built by Best, Best by Best, or Best Best Best? These are the kind of things that swim around my head when I don't keep it occupied with audiobooks or podcasts, so I figured I'd drive someone else crazy with it as well. The packaging shows all 3 bests in red, so it would appear the answer is B3 stands for Best, Best, Best. If anyone's asking, why does this matter, what difference does it make, and why are you spending time on this, I believe it's important that if you name something, the name should make sense. The name of my channel and my company consists of my initials and what I make. I feel like that makes more sense than trying to shoehorn letters or words into it. B3 isn't the only one that does this. True Ball, their initials are, the TRU is Tomorrow's Resources Unlimited, and I don't know what that has to do with archery or what they did before. And then Ball doesn't stand for anything, it's just True Ball. So Tomorrow's Resources Unlimited Ball. That doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, let's actually talk about the releases now. The B3 Archery Huuk and Huuk Mini were new for 2023 and are part of an apparent push in the industry towards offering thumb releases with open hook designs as well as having features that are appealing to hunters. Stan put out the Exxus, True Ball put out the Trident, Carter just released a new version of the Whisper, Hotshot has the Hookup, although that one came out last year or the year before, and B3 put out the Exit Hunter, Huuk, and Huuk Mini. All those companies have closed hook releases in their lines already, so they put these out in order to appeal to different demographics without openly competing with themselves. The other thing that's happening in the industry is manufacturers are trying to have different styles of releases that try to pair up to each other. Ultraview has the Hinge 2.0 and the UV button, Stan has the Onyx thumb, hinge, clicker, and resistance, Carter has the Wise Choice Evolution and Total Control and their knock-on equivalents, Truefire has the Synapse, Seer, and Seer X, True Ball has the Fulcrum and Abyss, and now B3 is giving it a go. So they're all trying to have like a hinge and a thumb that pair to each other and are supposedly supposed to have the same point of impact. That's not a guarantee though. The Huuk and Huuk Mini come in one material, aluminum, but each has 2 different color options. The Huuk can be ordered with a gray anodized finish or a copper-colored Cerakote, and the Huuk Mini comes in black anodized aluminum or white Cerakote. Whomever does the Cerakoting for B3 actually does a really nice job, though. I have a B3 Ranger hinge. These hooks are both anodized because I prefer that. But the B3 Ranger hinge that I have here is Cerakoted in flat dark earth, and it's actually, the finish is flawless, very consistent, and they didn't miss any spots. I still believe anodizing is a better coating, but Cerakote applied correctly is quite nice. The hardware used to assemble the hook is oxide-coated stainless, as are, I believe, the pins pins that are hammered in to hold it in place. Most of them are shiny and look to be stainless steel along with the hardware. There is one black pin that sits right here that is black, and I don't know why it's not the same color as the other ones, but I haven't seen any rust or corrosion on these yet, so I'm thankful for that because rust drives me absolutely crazy. The hook is available in two different sizes. It comes in Huuk and Huuk Mini. The Huuk is big and is akin to an extra large Stan Onyx. The Mini is closer to a large Onyx, which is what I use. The index finger bed and hook height are the same on both, but the middle and ring finger beds were shortened on the Mini, so there is a defined difference between the two, and it's not like a certain other company that just made the index finger a different size and left the rest of the release the same. As usual, there are PDFs on my website with scale pictures of everything I own. These pictures or PDFs are free to download, but if you appreciate the service, please feel free to use the PayPal link on the page to leave me a tip. It's not expected, but it's always appreciated. One thing they did was they reversed the direction the hook opens, so the hook and the hinges both open in the same direction. So that is one variable that may get you a similar anchor point and point of impact between the two. The hooks on the other B3 releases open towards your face, like this one. This one opens into your face, whereas the hook opens away from it. They state in their promo videos that they designed it to open its hook in the same direction as their back tension releases like the BT Pro, so they can be used together. They mentioned that it should paper tune the same, but that's going to depend on you more than how close the releases resemble each other. Little side note about the BT Pro hinge, because it wasn't out when my review came out of the other hinges. It is exactly the same as the BG Pro, but with a magnet in the head instead of rubber bands, and a slightly more aggressive geometry on the base of the head to allow it to sit a little deeper into its resting position. I did an unboxing video on that, and if you wanted to hear what it sounds like when I die a little inside, check that out after you finish watching this review. I didn't get to see what it looked like before I ordered it, and when I opened up the box, I really couldn't tell the difference between them until I gave it a closer look. The handles are exactly the same. So despite saying that the two are meant to be used in tandem with each other, the hook position of the Huuk and Huuk Mini is not the same as the hinges, and the finger beds are not the same shape or size because the Huuk is essentially a chopped up B3 Omega designed to resemble the BG Pro but not copy it 100%. So they didn't give it the full Trueball Abyss Fulcrum UV Hinge 2.0 UV button or Stan Onyx treatment and copy the finger beds and hook positions exactly between them. Instead, they adapted an existing design as best they could. It's kind of closer to like a TrueFire Synapse and TrueFire Sear situation where the handles are different, but they're close enough so that they could conceivably work together. In my experience, the handles and hook positions do not need to be exactly the same to get a similar point of impact between a hinge and a thumb, and it's almost better if they aren't. There are a lot of variables to pairing releases, and it's way more than I have time to cover in this video, so once I figure out the metrics that go into pairing them together, I'll let you know, because in my experience, the UV button and UV hinge 2.0, they don't impact the same. The Stan Onyx thumb and Stan Onyx hinge do not impact the same, but releases of different manufacturer and different hook positions and different hook length or neck lengths do. So it's going to come down to, it's going to have to do with form, and there's got to be a way, there's got to be like a correlation between hook position versus shot execution style. There's got to be a way to quantify that somehow, and as soon as I do, I'm going to share that magic formula with everybody else. The hook on the Huuk is small, but it is deep enough to keep it from slipping off if you draw with an index finger forward angle or hold it at a goofy angle at full draw. I was informed in my comments in a different video that the Carter EZ and EZS has an issue with the D-loop slipping off the hook if you draw it at an angle, which I checked and confirmed that it is actually true. This particular one does not have that issue. It has to do with the shape of the hook. The hook on the EZ isn't dished, so if you draw it at a different angle or have like a index finger up angle, this could very easily slip off. If they had dished it a little bit more, like if they gave it a little more hook, then it probably wouldn't be as much of a problem. But something to keep an eye on if you're looking at this release. I may have to do a review on it at some point. The hook height on the hook is fairly short and is situated between your index and middle finger. It's taller than a Carter Too Simple or a Whisper, but shorter than a Onyx, so you aren't going to have to sacrifice any draw length to be able to use this release. The hook position allows for pairing up with other releases, but for me it doesn't give me the same point of impact as the half dozen other releases I rotate through on a given range session. And I'm not sure why yet, and that's something that I'm trying to figure out. So being an open hook design, the Huuk and Huuk Mini are much easier to get attached to a D-loop than other thumb releases in the B3 line. You have to shuffle through around your fingers with the Omega and the Versa to get the hook closed, due to the direction they open and close, and also because you have to contend with the index finger ring. You kind of have to do, I used to call it the Sigma Shuffle, because the Scott Sigma, which shares the same trigger mechanism, which I'll talk about in a moment, has, but you kind of, the easiest way to do it is to get your thumb right here, get your index finger out of the hole, and then press it closed onto the D-loop. Not nearly as easy as the hook, where you just cock it, make sure, flip the little hook over, and then you're good to go. The Huuk and Huuk Mini use the same trigger mechanism and roughly the same handle shape as the Omega and Versa, but with an open hook that opens opposite to them. So if you've handled either of those, you'll know what you're getting. If you line them up and compare the handles, it's easy to see the family resemblance. Now, companies using the same internals and different handles is not a problem in and of itself. They actually do it all the time. No reason to reinvent the wheel every time you want to pull out a new handle. So they use the same mechanism in a different handle to accommodate different preferences, like open hook, closed hook, straight handle, swept handle, open index finger, closed index finger, attachment to a wrist strap, or 2, 3, or 4 fingers if you're talking about a solid handled release. You can see when you look at this line here, this is the hot shot line. All of these from my shoulder up all use the same trigger, and it's all different handles and different things. You've got the large straight handle, swept smaller handle, 2, 3, and 4 finger, open hook, closed hook, all the same trigger. And that's fine. That being said, I have some issues with B3 continually using this particular trigger mechanism, which is a descendant of the Scott Exxus and Exxus Core, and that is because the cocking button on it is stiff and becomes stiffer the heavier you set the trigger tension. It makes them unpleasant to operate if you have issues with grip strength. I don't have issues with grip strength, but I can see why other people would not like them as much. And there are other options available that cost less but are easier to operate. The cocking button should not leave an indentation on your thumb after using it. One might call that a good rule of thumb for release manufacturers. So B3 redesigned the cocking button on the Huuk and Huuk Mini to, I think, be easier to press, even though it doesn't help. They dished it out slightly and polished it smooth instead of knurling it like they did on the Versa and Omega. The reasoning was to get it almost flush with the spine of the release, but I don't know why that's better. It doesn't get in the way of anything, and it's just as hard to press being smooth and flatter than being curved and knurled. So given my experience with various other companies and releases, B3's steer-activated thumb releases are the hardest releases to cock in the industry. They are easily the stiffest out of anything that I have on this wall. So another small issue is this is an open hook design where you still have to reset the hook with your finger. It isn't difficult to do so, but with an MSRP of close to $300 each, I think they had ample opportunity to put a spring under the hook or a magnet inside the case to hold it in the ready position. The only other top-end release within $50 of it that has no hook retention is the Scott Apex Core. I guess it runs in the family. Every other thumb release in this price bracket with the hook, with one exception, has hook retention, meaning something that keeps the hook in place, in the ready position, ready to be cocked, so you don't have to manipulate it with your finger. And those are the Onyx, UV Button, Trueball Trident, and Blade. The exception to the rule is the Trueball Goat, but that's because it's a 2-in-1 thumb hinge combo, so based on its design and the compromises around it, it really can't have hook retention because it also has to function as a hinge, so that one really doesn't count. There are also a few odd things going on in the trigger stem area. The thumb barrel post and thumb barrel are the same ones that come off of the Versa and the Omega. It is a multi-axis adjustable design, and a small thumb barrel is included. There is a larger thumb barrel available for purchase on the B3 website, and I recommend it. However, they redesigned the trigger stem to have only one mounting point for a thumb barrel post with two. The trigger travel is still adjusted via a socket head cap screw attached to the base of the trigger stem. The new stem is supposed to give greater range of adjustment, but it actually doesn't. The cynical part of me thinks the cocking button and the trigger stem were changed to reduce the family resemblance between the Versa and Omega and the Huuk, and make the Huuk look like a totally new design. It isn't, and not only that, it doesn't buy you any more adjustment than the original trigger stem. Here is the Omega Pro with its thumb barrel back as far as it'll go, and here's the Huuk Mini set the same way. It's still a good amount of adjustment range, but it wasn't broke, it didn't need to be fixed, and the result ends up being the same. With the Huuk, the deciding factor is the travel adjustment screw, though. This piece, which I'm going to talk about in a second, on the assembly is what hits the travel adjustment screw and keeps it from going back any further. If that wasn't there, you'd have about probably 270 degrees of adjustment range. Not that you'd use it all. And then it would make sense for the cocking button to be dished and out of the way. So because there's only one bolt holding the thumb barrel post to the trigger stem, and anything held in place with one screw tends to come loose when we least want it to, they had to manufacture this little metal tumor that sits on top of the trigger stem that isn't actually attached to anything, and its job is to provide tension against the trigger stem to lock the thumb barrel post in place and keep it from shifting. The trigger stem tumor is composed of two parts, and I think it's anodized aluminum or steel. I'll have to weigh it. The tumor has a pin that fits into the second screw hole of the thumb barrel post, and a set screw that passes all the way through it and out the bottom and presses on top of the trigger stem. So if you need to move your thumb barrel post around to fine-tune its position, you have to loosen that set screw first, or you end up cross-threading the single mounting screw on the way in or out. The oxide coating on the threads of my mounting screw were already worn off when the release arrived, and the threads are rounded. I can't imagine this being anything but a reactionary adjustment to realizing that one bolt is not going to keep the trigger post from shifting. The ones that sit on top, the ones with thumb barrels that sit on top of a post have a tendency to have, you can put more torque on them than just like a single barrel, so they usually need two mounting points in order to keep them from shifting around. Only the best for the best by the best, I suppose. Now that I've said all that, there are good things about them, and I don't want to completely write them off in case I run into one of their sales reps at a shoot at some point. Apparently manufacturers watch every piece of content that comes out about their stuff, and I found that out at Tax 7 Springs this past year. I was recognized by both the Hotshot and UltraView sales team. I'm not much of a social butterfly, so anyone recognizing me in public because of things I said online was not something I expected to happen yet. So some positive attributes. The finger beds on the Huuk and Huuk Mini are fairly generic and the handle is lightly swept. There are dimples machined into the sides of the handle. They do not have a functional purpose, but I think they look better than having them completely smooth. On their other releases, they claim the texture machined on the sides are to enhance your grip. However, the finger beds are what we hang on to, and they're smooth on all the releases. So if they wanted to add grip to their releases, then they have it backwards. The Huuk and Huuk Mini are both dedicated 3-finger releases with a star drive attachment point to either close off the ring finger, which it actually does quite well, or change it to a 4-finger, which is included in the package. That's fine, but with a solid 3-finger handle, you lose the ability to use the release as a 2-finger. So if that's something you're looking to be able to do, then the Omega Pro or the Versa Pro, which is over here somewhere, are the ones you should check out if you want to stick with the B3 brand. The star drive attachment system allows the finger attachments to be set in a number of different positions, from butted against the finger beds to a completely unusable position. So as a 4-finger, you can adjust it where your pinky sits and also adjust the feel of the size of the finger bed. If you turn it in towards the neck, you can make the 4-finger bed feel smaller. You can also use the 4-finger to close it off and have a different design, or just have like a different look to it, but it just works the same as the nub. In the package, you get the nub and the 4-finger attachment. So you can also use the nub as a 4-finger too if you need like a small, if you have little teeny fingers like I do. So a couple of more positives. The finger beds on the Huuk and Huuk Mini are wide and comfortable, so drawing the bow with the Huuk is actually quite pleasant. It actually feels like you're drawing a little bit less weight based on the amount of surface area that you're pulling against. The trigger itself on the Huuk and Huuk Mini is the crispest of all the B3 thumbs, so I think they did some work on the mechanism. Many of the other B3 thumbs that I own have trigger creep that absolutely refuses to be adjusted out. They're almost like rolling triggers instead of ones with like a with like a stiff wall and a brake. The Huuk and Huuk Mini are not like that. They have a stiff wall and a crisp brake at any tension setting, which ranges from very light to very heavy. The travel adjustment on this one is currently set at 1/8 of a turn off of failure, and I don't want to get it any closer because I have heard somebody misfired this, but I don't know how they had it set up. So this was good enough for me, and I've used it in this fashion, and I haven't had any misfires. The instructions do not specify a recommended setting, but it says adjustments should be done in 1/16th turn increments, and the release should be tested before use. So technically you should be good 1/16th off the bottom, but I'm fine with 1/8, and we're probably not going to notice at full draw. If you do decide to try it at 1/16th off failure, do it at your own risk. Fit and finish are very good on the hooks. B3 had issues initially with the fit of the two sides of their handle case, and that seems to have gone away. I detailed those in my B3 thumb release video that I did months ago. Everything I bought in the last year from them, though, has been much, much better. There are no sharp edges or raised edges on either of them, including the exposed steel parts. So their QC has improved significantly since their founding, so that's definitely a plus. This release can be suitable for hunting in that it fulfills one of my two criteria. The two criteria are a closed hook or means to lock it onto a D-loop, which it doesn't have, or a dedicated lanyard attachment point. B3 had the foresight to offer a removable wrist strap attachment point for those who want to use one, and they also included a plug that fits flush with the spine of the handle for those who don't want to use a lanyard. So this one has it, this one has the plug in it, and this one has the removable lanyard attachment. So the hook is capable of accepting a lanyard of your choosing, or B3's buckle wrist strap as shown on this Ranger hinge. However, the buckle strap is not included in the package with the hook. You have to purchase it separately, and I think at the asking price for the Huuk and Huuk Mini, it should have been included regardless of whether you would use it or not. The MSRP for the Huuk and Huuk Mini is $289.99 for the anodized model and $294.99 for the Cerakote models. In that price bracket, they are competing with the likes of the Stan Onyx UV Button, Scott Apex, Trueball Blade Pro Flex Goat, and Trident. Basically the top of the line offerings from the most known brands in the industry. I do not believe this is a group the Huuk and Huuk Mini belong in, but that's where they fall in price. I actually think B3's entire Cera activated line would be more competitive at about $50 cheaper, given they are updated versions of a decade-old design that started with a different company. By features, the TrueFire Synapse would actually be a closer comparison. It is also a dedicated 3-finger thumb release that can be adjusted into a 4-finger and shares many of its other attributes, including lanyard attachment point, multi-axis thumb barrel assembly, and the Synapse does have a closing hook though. So it's more of, this would probably be closer, more appropriate for hunting versus that which would be more appropriate for target, but I also know people that hunt with them, so different strokes for different folks. Overall, if you are a dedicated B3 archery aficionado, that's going to take me a few takes to get out, then the Huuk and Huuk Mini are worthy additions to the line. They have good ergonomics, nice trigger, open hook design, some modularity, but they have some idiosyncrasies that may make them less palatable than other offerings. Specifically, the stiffness of the cocking button. If you are not dedicated to this brand, I could probably recommend a bunch of other releases, most of them less expensive, that I would go for first. But like I said, I do like this release, but given the options, if you want something different, if you don't want to patronize the most popular brands in the industry and want to go for something different or support a smaller company that is an offshoot of Scott Archery, then I would recommend going with these guys. Like I said, if you can put up with how stiff that cocking button is, then I think you can enjoy this release. So, but those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and happy hunting. Here's the Omega. So they dished it out slightly and polished it smooth instead of knurling it like...